So what I often find from attending these workshops or other teaching related workshops is the most valuable thing for me is, seeing how other, the resources and strategies that other people have found to solve some problem they have in their own teaching. And so, these are some simple digital tools that I found to accomplish certain tasks. But really, the title of the talk could be the solutions I found for my own problems. But of course, when I say solutions, really what this is just the most recent and the least bad option I found for dealing with whatever issue I have. And of course, something new may come along or some way to improve it, or I'll go to a talk and I go, that is a far better way to deal with this issue that I'm having than what I was currently using. So keep all that in mind when I'm telling you these strategies that I've used. They may work for something that some problem that you have that's similar, or maybe you'll be able to suggest something different that I try to solve one of these problems. So the first thing I'll do is just tell you what these problems of mine were and the solution that I'm currently using to deal with those problems. So the first one I'll talk about is an issue with managing the assignment workflow between student and instructor. And what I'm currently using a lot in all of my classes is Google Docs in some fashion as a way of, assigning work to students and collecting it back from them. And I'll show you a few different ways that I do that. Another problem that I had was I wanted to provide some notes to students, basically like a supplement to a textbook kind of thing. But I wanted to be able to embed some self-check questions into it. So this wasn't like creating a quiz or something. I didn't need to have points available for it. And so I figured out just last semester that you could embed Qualtrics quizzes or questions into a page in Canvas, and then the students can check how well they're understanding some content by seeing whether they can answer some questions using Qualtrics. So I'll talk about how I did that also. And then the last problem was thinking about, for an online only class, I like to do case studies in a lot of my classes. And, sometimes that's difficult to do in an online class. How do you, especially if it's an interrupted case study or something, how do you build that? And so I'm going to show you an example of one thing I'm doing in my online class that's using Canvas quizzes, because of all the things you can build into anything of theirs, really. And so how I'm doing that to give students a case study. And feel free at any time to go ahead and interrupt me with questions, or Rachel, if there's something in the chat, because it's so hard for me to monitor, feel free to interrupt at any time. So what I'm going to do is sort of walk you through each. Okay, just walk you through each of these and then do a show and tell, and just show you from the instructor view, from the student view, what some of these things look like. Okay, so the first thing with using Google Docs. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of backstory of why I'm using these. So if, probably all of us remember BC, so before Canvas, and Blackboard was really terrible at managing assignment workflow. I was never found a good way to do that. And so I started using Google Docs. Google Docs worked much better for me in terms of giving students assignments, being able to edit or make comments on assignments, return it to them. The workflow was much easier than using Blackboard. But after Canvas now, so I was actually on a committee that was looking at various learning management systems. And I remember that, Canvas, they probably weren't the only one, but they were one of the LMSs that integrated Google Drive right into their learning management system. So if you were using Google Docs or any of the other Google suite of products, you could just embed things right into Canvas. And so that was one of the things I was really excited about. And it is a very cool tool to have. It's not without its drawbacks, of course, as with everything. So I'll talk about some of those things. Okay, just a couple other things I want to say about Google Docs before I show those. So I have become a convert over the last several years, and I only use Microsoft Word when I have to for some reason, because there are some, Google Docs can be limited in some ways, but it's superior in a lot of ways for me because it auto saves everything, to the cloud. So I never have to worry, wait, when was the last time I hit Control S? Because if the computer crashes, it'll have a backup saved to some time, but who knows when that is. But you also have version histories. So instead of saving version 1, version 2, version 3, you may have a folder on your computer if you're writing a grant or writing some paper, and you've got final version .1 and final version .3 and 5 and so on and so forth. But with this, you can see the version history and just revert to any version, going back till the beginning. You can access these documents on any of your devices from anywhere, and that's been useful for me. The other thing that's nice, like I'll put together my syllabi and things in Google Docs because I wouldn't have to, save it as a PDF, re-upload it. You just link to something in that's a Google Doc, and when you change it, then the link to it has been changed as well. They're very easy to share. In addition to being easy to share, I can restrict access to something if I want to. So I can say only somebody with an LC Mail account, which all the students and all the faculty have, those are the only people who can see this document. If it's something that I'd rather just keep to myself, I can make sure that even if somebody else had the link, they can't access it unless they're logged in with their LC Mail account. And it's easy to share, with a certain group of students or with certain faculty members, whatever you want to do there. And like I said, everybody at LC has a G Suite account, so you don't have to worry about that either. Okay, so some examples of what I do here. So I'm going to show you a version where I create an assignment, a Google document assignment that's just embedded directly into Canvas, and then a workaround I use when that option won't work for some reason. So if I want to create a group assignment, or if it's something that some students are going to need to print off and then re-upload. So I'll show examples of both of those things. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let me just jump in here and show you this first version here. Okay, and everybody's seeing instead of the PowerPoint, the web page. Is that right? Okay, great. Okay, so this is a view where you would go, to assignments in Canvas, hit the plus button to create an assignment. You title your assignment, and then when creating a submission type, you choose an external tool, and that's when you can embed anything from Google. And there's a list of different external tools that Canvas works with. And so if you go down to a Google Drive cloud assignment, I can now assign any type of Google thing I want, whether it's a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, a Google Slide, a Google Drawing, so on and so forth. And so I've linked my Canvas with my Google Drive. So I can just search for that assignment. And once I select it, it embeds a link to that assignment sort of thing into here. And then I'm done with that. Now, from the student perspective, what happens when they click on this sort of assignment? It's going to want to, I selected to have it load into a new window. So they click this button. It's going to load this. It's going to make me just log in with my correct account here. Okay, so now I've opened this up as a student. And if you're familiar with Google Docs, down here, everything looks just like a Google Doc, but there's some extra information up here. This is from Canvas. It says your teachers created this cloud assignment, and it has a submit button right here for them. So as soon as they're done with whatever they need to do in this assignment, they simply hit submit and it ports it back into Canvas as a completed assignment. So you don't need to worry about what the assignment is. This is a lab handout for something in genetics about probability and chi-square and things like that. I wanted to point out one thing though that I've started doing with my Google Docs, and it's made things a lot easier, which is when I want an answer from a student, I now enter in these tables, just like a one box table, and the box, will get larger if they type more. The reason for that is I have students writing their text in here and it becomes very hard to see the questions from the answers. Sometimes they'll just start their answer right here, right? Don't even put a line space, between anything. So it's actually much faster for me to be able to look in these, colored boxes here to see what they're texting in, right? Rather than try to find where their text is here. So I just started doing this within the last semester or so, and it has made things much easier for me. So, someone types in, the probability stuff into their assignment, and then the student clicks submit. And there's a message up here that it's been submitted, but in this case, they could still work on it more and submit again if that's been allowed, that someone can submit something more than one time, which in this case, I put it that way since this was my test run. So what happens now if we go back to the other end, and I can now open up, go into grades, click on speed grader, and here's their submission. Now, here's where we can talk about some pros and cons of using Google Docs. So what this has done is essentially created a file that's a Microsoft Word file that I could download, and then it's in Canvas essentially as a PDF. So I can't click in here and edit anything, but I can use the Canvas tools to make comments, to highlight things, to add text boxes, all the other normal ways that you'd be able to edit any sort of Canvas assignment that was in here. So, so that all works nicely. I can do that. I can just grade it just like any Canvas assignment would be in here. So those are all useful things for this type of assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question real quick.
Sure.
Can they continue to submit after you have graded it? Or how would you know what they have done since the last time?
Yeah, so great question. So it is going to create a static file when they submit. So if you said, I only allow one submission, then you're only going to get one submission, no matter what work they do to it after that time point. If you're allowing 2 submissions or an unlimited number of submissions, then they could submit from this Google Doc multiple times. And let me go to the grade book here, because this was actually an earlier submission I made. So let me see if it updated that here. Yeah, so you can see up here now, it says 1 of 2 submissions. So if you allowed a student to go and make some corrections to it, they're going to have to submit it as an all new, oops, how did that, here we go. So here are the different submissions actually that they've done. I had that wrong. So I've actually in the testing have submitted this numerous times. So you can see the note, this is not the most recent submission, but I can go to the most recent one, which was just a few minutes ago, and see that I have now, typed something into one of these boxes. So what it will do, the student still has access to this Google Doc, so they can still be in there typing things away, doing whatever. But if you're not allowing for any additional submissions, you won't see any of that. If you are allowing for additional submissions, I think by default, it's going to take you in the gradebook maybe to the most recent submission. But if you want to see an older one, you'd be able to do that as well.
And then if you grade it and they redo it, like it already has a grade attached, but when they resubmit it, it's going to go back to saying that there's no grade there, I think. Right. And then you can regrade it or revert to the previous grade. At least in my experience, that's what I've seen.
I'm not entirely sure. That's not something that, so when I've had, so there's one assignment that I do in one of my
Yeah.
classes where they turn in a rough draft and then later a final draft. And I just have those as separate assignments. So they don't upload the same thing multiple times. There are two
Gotcha.
separate grading items in Canvas.
Yeah, and Angela, I know, I think you're here. I don't know if you can hear me, but I think I think what happens if you submit after you've graded is that they can then you'd have to just grade it again.
Yes, it's kind of, he mentioned this before, it makes a static capture of each submission. So if you marked up the one that was marked February 4th with a bunch of inline markup stuff, highlighting and whatever, and then I submitted it again, then I'm gonna have a submission for February 4th at 3:30 that would be a distinct
Different.
static piece that you would then have to mark up again. And you have the option, there's a little on the right hand side, you can see where it says use this same grade for the resubmission. So
Oh yeah.
you either presumably improve their grade because they're redoing their work and submitting something better, or you would just say, nope, same as before.
Lorinda, does that answer your question? Are you good?
Yep.
I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
If you have, say, 15 students in the classroom, are they all going to be in the same Google file here to answer this?
No, that's a great
So-
question. So it's going to make a new copy for every student.
Okay.
So once they open the assignment, it creates a fresh copy for them. So it also means that, and I'm going to show you actually what I do when I don't embed it directly into Canvas to get around this same issue. That's the next thing I'm going to show you. But yeah, it's a fresh thing. So once the student types on it, it's just their work. But this is why, so this is one of the limitations here, is that if I want a group of 5 students to work on this Google Doc together, I can't assign it in this way. When you're using an external tool as an assignment in Canvas that make this a group assignment, that little checkbox goes away. So if you want to have a Google Doc, you can't use this way of embedding an assignment in there, because once a student opens it, it creates an individual assignment for each student. So that's a good thing when you want an individual student to have an assignment. But if you want to create something that they do as a group, there's some extra steps that you have to take. But that's the next thing I'll show you, is how a way that you can get around that issue. Any other questions before I go to that other example?
Yeah, and there's 2 quick questions. One is,
Sure.
If you use the group assign tool in Canvas, does that, it still gives individual Google Docs, right? Is that right?
No, so you can't even select that as an option if
Okay,
you embed
gotcha.
a Google Doc. That I tried to do that for something this semester. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this will be perfect, and I had to, I did some searching on the message boards for Canvas or whatever, and there's no, like, that tool just, because there's a little box, a little button when you make an assignment
Right.
that says make this a group assignment. But when you select an external tool like a Google Drive assignment, that box goes away. It's no longer an option.
Okay, good. And the other question, and this might be more of a question for Angela, is from Nancy, and it's, does using Google Docs affect overall or your cloud storage? And so, yeah, I guess the question is, where do all of these pieces or all these documents get stored? And if we have our own sort of limited storage, is it getting stored in or is it getting stored in Canvas, or?
We don't really have limited storage, or it's not very limited. With those Google education accounts, I have hundreds of gigabytes of stuff stored in my Google Drive, and I've never known. And the Google Docs and things like that don't really count against your storage, and they take almost no space. So that will never, in your entire career at LC, unless Google changes their policies, that will never be an issue.
Challenge accepted.
I would like to see I would love to see somebody run a report. I want to know where I rank in terms of how much Google storage I'm using, because I feel like I have to be way towards the top, because essentially my entire hard drive is backed up to the Google Cloud. So All right. So let's see, I'm on the instructor view. Okay, so this next thing that I wanted to show was a way that so this is a workaround. If you want to create a group assignment using Google Docs, or if you're creating an assignment so this was for something earlier this semester in my class. Let me just jump to this. And it was an in-class worksheet, but I'm teaching remotely. And so this particular worksheet, though, was asking students to draw the electron arrangement around an atom, or draw other things. Now, these are all things that are possible to do electronically. In fact, that's what I would probably just do. Oh, it's really easy. I'll insert a Google drawing and I will make circles and do this and that. But that's a level of technical expertise that I don't want my students to have to worry about figuring out, when all I care about is that they sketch out a quick electron arrangement, right? So what I did instead was say, here are the options. You can do this electronically if you have the skills to do so. If you don't, what you're going to do is just print this off, write on it, and then take a picture or use a scanner app or do whatever, and then re-upload it to Canvas. So what I've done instead of, so when I created the assignment, let me go to here instead. I gave them the instructions on how they're going to turn their assignment in. And I've selected the submission type as being a file upload. And then what I'm doing is, instead of linking that, using an external tool and linking that to a Google document, I've just created a link to a Google document with one caveat, which I'll share, which is in the link for the document, where it says copy, it would normally say edit. But if you erase edit and write copy instead, whenever anybody clicks on that link, this message comes up. Would you like to make a copy of this assignment? So I don't have to worry about making separate copies for every student or anything like that. I just change the URL to say copy instead of edit. And when a student clicks on it, they're forced to make a copy. It will save this to their drive, their Google Drive. Why isn't the button working? There it goes. And the original file, when I edit it, I don't have to worry that it's not editing some other version that a student's going to see. The student gets whatever the newest version is. They get a copy of the newest version every time they click that link. So this student
Eric,
yeah.
Eric, before you move on, there's a request to one more time, just quick run through those steps for doing the copy rather than them working on the master document.
Yep, absolutely. So let me go back to this again. So if you go to let me go here first. So when you go to a Google Doc, right, you've got some sort of URL for that document. And at the end, let's forget this part here because that's showing heading. It always ends in something like \edit. So if you're sharing it with somebody, and you give them the link to this, it's going to say edit. And when they open it, they're going to see this version that they're able to view or edit or whatever their permissions are for that document. But if you take this edit and simply delete it and write in copy instead, and then you copy this as your URL and provide that as the link, it will force instead, Zoom screen move out of the way so I can see the window. Come on. There we go. Now it's back. Boy, that is unfortunate. Okay. There we go. So now what I've typed in at this URL, let me edit so you can see what this is. Link options. So the text for my link okay, it's not letting me show that very easily. The text for this link at the very end All right, just says copy at the very end. Okay, and because it says copy, when anybody clicks this link, they cannot access the file itself, the original file. They can only access a copy of that, which means now everybody has an individual version of the assignment. And so they can now print this off, or if they want to edit it, directly, they can do so. And it's a Google Doc. It works just as any other Google Doc is. So many students in the class printed it, they made their drawings, and then they used their phone to either take regular pictures, or they used a scan app of some kind that would scan it as a PDF. And then they uploaded that file via the submission link in Canvas, which is, let me go over here to the student view again, sorry. Okay, here's the student view. And so they've clicked this button to make their copy. Then when they're ready to upload it, they hit submit assignment. And now they've got ways to upload their file. Now I haven't used this where it says you can just turn in a Google Doc, because again, I didn't totally realize they could just do this. So I'm gonna need to add this as an option for students in the future. But usually, because they wanted to draw on it anyway, students were printing and drawing on it, and then they would just choose their file and upload. Now, what this also allows, of course, is that I now in the assignments, let me go back to my assignment here. Because I'm not embedding directly the Google Doc, I can select this as an assignment. So this is a way now where I can use Google Docs still and make it a group assignment. Now, there are some extra challenges here, right? Which is that I either have to assign this, if I've got 5 different groups, I have to create 5 different assignments and only assign it to, certain people. So I could make one assignment and say, assign it to these 5 students, duplicate that assignment, assign it to only these 5 students, duplicate it again, assign it to only these 5 students, and that way they all have the same shared assignment, right? Or really what you need to do is make a different copy of this, and then you can share it, or I can hit the share button here and share it with those 5 students that are going to be working on it together, but then still have it housed in Canvas so that it's submitted through Canvas, so that it's backed up in Canvas, so that it, all the rules and stipulations that you need regarding, the LS, everything's still in there via Canvas. So that's a workaround for allowing for group assignments, or for allowing students to not have to turn in something only electronically.
And Angela has put a link for the step-by-step directions for the copy trick sharing Google Drive documents, in case you want those
Awesome.
instructions
Okay.
again. Yeah, so thank you so much, Angela, for doing that. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to now play around some more with teaching students how that if I don't embed an assignment as a Google Doc, they can still use Google Docs to turn it in instead of uploading a file. I hadn't realized that was something that they could do. So now that's something I've already learned from today that I'll try to add in. Okay, questions about these that are still out there?
Eric, can you go to the top right where the 3 little dots are all the way in the corner? Yeah.
For this?
No, all the way. Keep going. Keep all the way to,
up
yeah,
here?
and click that and make it a little bit bigger for the interpreter. Yeah, like
Oh,
maybe,
the text for the
like 125%. I think you can, yeah, maybe like,
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
perfect.
Is that good enough now?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So let me jump back to, okay. So I showed you an example where you can directly embed the Google assignments, and then the students just have a submit button right there in their Google Doc, and it shoots it back to Canvas. So that's the most straightforward way for both, I think, students and faculty to do this. But of course, if you want to make a group assignment, or if the assignment is not easily completed digitally, there's that other trick where you have you force students to make a copy of a Google document. The thing I like about this is, again, if I've edited the assignment in the year since I last assigned it, right? All I do is, because I have a copy at the end, they're going to get the newest version whenever that link. All right, but some pros and cons of Google Docs in this assignment workflow. So some of the pros: students don't have to download an assignment and work on it and then re-upload. If we're using it as the direct embedding there. Any changes that I make to my Google document are incorporated up until the time that students get their own copy of the assignment. Obviously, we're reducing paper use if they're getting all these assignments digitally rather than prints of them. For the students, everything that they're doing in Google Docs is automatically saved to their Google Drive. And when they are submitting things, then those things are automatically banked in Canvas. So they've got the assignment now, they've got their original in Google Drive, and they've got what they submitted in Canvas. And if I have time, I'll talk a little bit about this later, but I mentioned the version history with Google Docs. And so if a student says, well, I completed this work, I just forgot to hit the submit button in Canvas. Well, they could share that Google Doc with you, and you can go to version history and you can see when they actually did complete that work and whether they're telling you the truth or not, right? So that's another advantage that's not spelled out in here, but part of that version history. Now, some of the downsides to this. So Google Docs are awesome in terms of their collaborative power, right? So if you have a document that's just shared between you and a student, or a group of students and you can easily make comments, or like with Word, with track changes, it kind of has all this stuff built in, so you can make suggestions on their documents. But when they submit something via Canvas, it just turns it into a flat, right, PDF document. You can make comments on it, but you're not sort of editing directly into their document. So that workflow is not as straightforward if you were just bouncing a Google Doc sort of back and forth. If you embed things directly into Canvas, you can't do group assignments, but there are some workarounds. But when you use that workaround, you lose some of these powerful things about just that direct, submission back and forth from Canvas. So, any questions on that before I want to move on to the other examples I have here? Okay, so these are a little quicker. So the second one was, how do I embed self-check questions into some notes I want to provide? So when I arrived at LC, online classes in our division anyway, we're using this program called SoftChalk, and it had lots of little cool tools that you can embed into these web pages that could use. You could put in crosswords, you could put in little pop-up questions, all kinds of cool things. So we don't have that software. I mean, that software had its problems for sure. I didn't actually like it, other than it had cool little tools. And I am not a programmer of any language of any type, so I don't know how to build really cool websites so students can do things with them. So, but what I wanted to do, I had just this one thing in genetics. I wanted to give them some population genetics notes. It was something we weren't talking about in class, but we were doing a lab on it. And I just wanted them to get some basic information. So I wanted to be able to provide them some notes, but put in some just quick self-check questions that they could use. So I will show you what that looks like. So here from the instructor end, I created a new page. And with a page, you can use all of these nice text editing tools, and you can, make different headings, and you can put in tables, images. You can certainly embed YouTube videos or other types of into here. And from a student perspective, let me jump over to that really quick before I come back to this. Let me find my population genetics notes. Here we go. So then the student is, working through these notes. Sorry, I don't know. Let me zoom in a little more on those. There we go. So let me come all the way down here to show you what I want to show. Here we go. All right, so they read all of these notes, and here's where they have a self-check on the notes. So I have created some questionnaires using Qualtrics and then embedded those into this page. So it asks them just a comprehension question here that they can answer, and when they submit that, because in Qualtrics you can have auto grading, it tells them if they got it correct or not. When you got it right, okay, perfect. They can continue down on the notes until they find the next question check here. Here's the first question. I told them to answer it in a certain format. I don't remember what the answer to this is. Okay, I got it wrong. Okay. They can move on to a second question. I've got multiple questions in this particular one, right? So they can answer that again, whatever their answer is here. Wrong again, okay? Let me try the next one. And this one I have 3 or 4 questions, okay? And then, they move on to the next one, and I think I have maybe one more embedded in here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Some additional practice problems. I've got multiple choice, multiple answer. They've got, fill in the blank or numeric thing. The Qualtrics can grade a few different types of questions. Okay, but how do you do this? That's the big question. So it's not as straightforward as just adding in an image or a video or something. You have to actually work a little bit with the HTML code. Again, I am not somebody who knows anything about coding really. So I just did some Googling and I said, how do I embed Qualtrics survey into Canvas? And I found something on a web page. Whoops. And I'll show you. Here's how you embed it. So you have to know a little bit about Qualtrics, of course, to make these surveys. But when you make something in Qualtrics, you can get a link to that survey. When you have your link to that survey, you enter it in here, and otherwise you just copy and paste code like this. Okay. And then when you go to your page that you're making here, you actually have to look at the HTML code. And I mean, I look at this and it makes my head hurt, right? But I just have to find some sort of landmark to tell me where in this page I intended to embed this quiz or this question. And then I copy and paste that code that has this source that's now my link to that particular Qualtrics quiz. And then I save that, or I can go back and see if it worked here, right? I can click this again and see, did it embed my Qualtrics survey or quiz into this page? And if it has, then you're done. And now you've got something interactive there for your students in that page.
And I think everybody, this is a question that came up, I think everybody on campus does have access to Qualtrics, but you might have to do you have to get a code from institutional research still? We did when we originally got it, and I'm actually not quite sure right now what that is. I know there's a Qualtrics page, and there are trainings from Grace on occasion for using it.
It's been so long for me since I got mine. I don't remember. I don't know what the new policy is. I have one, and I know we can all get them, but I don't know what
I'll look at the page and paste it in the, okay. Oh, you can just sign up using your email address, as somebody, Heather pointed out. So
okay, awesome.
I'm gonna direct people to the Qualtrics page at LCSC, provided it still exists. Again, yeah, it's so long ago, I can forget some of that. Yeah. So just so people have that connection too.
Now, so there are some good and bad things about this one as well, right? So Qualtrics has a lot of cool options if you're creating, I mean, you can create something really advanced with lots of branching options, I'll say. And by branching, I mean, you can say, if a student says yes to this question, then skip the next question and go to the third question. If a student answers no to this question, then jump to this other question. And so you could do some really cool things, like maybe you want to do a choose your own adventure assignment for students or something, right? And so you could build a whole thing into a page in Canvas that embeds this Qualtrics, and you have them jumping all around to different things based on their answers to previous questions. And Qualtrics, like I said, it embeds nicely into a page in Canvas, and we all have access to Qualtrics accounts. The cons, of course, is that you do have to, so you've got to learn Qualtrics and figure out how to make these types of instruments in Qualtrics. You do have to use that very minimum HTML coding, basically some copy and pasting in the right places in order to embed something in there. But if you do all that, then you could build some I think some pretty cool things in there. Now, of course, this is all for things that you're not planning on grading. I mean, so let me step back. You could turn this into a graded thing, because you could have Qualtrics collect the login information for anyone who wanted to visit that page, right? You could say, make them log in, and then you could track every student's answers to all the questions. But then you'd have to have created sort of a manual assignment in Canvas and then, enter in what all those grades are. So I used this because this is something I'm not monitoring whether students are getting these correct or not, right? And if I were doing something, if I were using this as like a case study or something, it would be for one that I don't care what their answers are, or I'm not giving them a grade for it at least. But now this and the next example of a case study can be interchangeable in a lot of ways, but they're two different options, for depending on exactly what type of assignment or what tweaking you may need. You might go with either embedding Qualtrics into a page or using quizzes in Canvas to do very similar types of things. Does anybody have any additional questions on the Qualtrics page?
Just a lot of people expressing love for this idea.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. Okay, well, this next one then you might think is cool too, because you can do a lot of the same things here. So this is delivering a case study using Canvas quizzes. So I've actually used a couple different ways to do case studies for online only classes. So what I would do in Blackboard, and I have a case study, I still sort of do this in Canvas, which is only one thing, that they have to work through a module one thing at a time. So I have one that has like, they have to read a PDF file, and then they take a quiz on that, right? They answer a couple questions that are quizzes. But then they have to complete that before the next PDF file before they can access the next PDF file. And then they take the quiz and they have to complete that before they access the next PDF. That's one way of doing things. And I do it that way because I actually have a case study from somebody where all the information is delivered via a PDF. And I don't want to have to copy and paste it all into a new thing. So that's how I structured that particular interrupted case study. This one is different, where I actually just want all the information inside this Canvas quiz, because I've built in videos, I've got images, I've got text, I've got all these sorts of things in addition to some questions. So that's what I'm going to show you here. Okay, so let me go to, here we go. So I've got a module here, and they're going to go into this cancer case study for this online class. So it opens up, and this is actually one I took from the SUNY Buffalo case study collection. Parts of it came from that, and then I've added a bunch of my own things from there. So here's the beginning of this case study. Oh, I'm not in the student view. I need to move over one. Well, so from the instructor view, I'll show you that really quickly. That I just created a description here, and then I begin creating questions, essay questions, multiple choice questions. You can embed images into your questions. Let me just sorry if I'm rolling too fast, but I want to try to get down this page, right? So I'm just embedding lots of images into the questions in Canvas. And at some point here, I'll skip that. Eventually, you'll see I've even embedded some videos, but I'll show you that from the student perspective first here. Okay, let me, if my mouse will cooperate. Here we go. Okay, so the student perspective, they've logged into this, and you see I've disabled backtracking. So this is an example. If you're doing an interrupted case, you don't want them to jump ahead, and you want them to answer the questions before they've looked at something that you don't want them to necessarily know before they've invested in trying to think of the answers on their own. So that's the reason for prohibiting backtracking in this particular case.
And Eric, I'm sure that you did this, and I was just texting somebody or not, using the mess or chatting, but did you define the interrupted case study or what interrupted means?
No, that's great. Thanks for reminding me of that. So by interrupted case study, what I mean is a case study that has multiple parts to it. And in the first part, it will pose some kind of question or problem, let's say, for the student. And they're going to talk about it in a group, or maybe it's an individual thing, and then sort of report out on something. And then you provide them with the second part. And the second part may provide some additional information about what they first read about. And so now maybe the model that they were constructing in their head has changed because now they've got new information. And then they answer some questions at the end of part 2. And then you hand them part 3. Now we're adding more information to this model. So that's the sort of thing I mean about an interrupted case study, and why I might want to prevent a student from seeing what's ahead before they've really thought through. Take some time, think through this thing before you just go and see what the right answer might be. Okay, this maybe is, oh, it seems to be, let's see if I can get in here, or if it's, might not have the permissions set up right here to let me get into this. Let me see. I will problem solve, and I will go to the student view instead, and I can still go to the cancer case study. Okay. Okay, so viewing this as a student, begin. And again, just some introductory information, and it asks them to just, answer some question. So this is, it's worth 0 points because this is not a question I'm grading. This is a totally auto-graded quiz because any sorts of essay questions that were in here, I made worth 0 points. So because they weren't big thought-provoking questions, I just wanted students to work through this material. Okay. So I'm going to skip answering the questions, which means it's always going to ask if I really want to do that. Okay, so we see the first thing, I've embedded images. And so they're analyzing some data here and then saying, do they think this person has cancer or not? And then I provide more information. Okay, so you said, based on this, I think they have cancer or I don't. Well, now we're going to see some pathology images. So maybe they're going to change their mind or something, right? Answer some more questions about cancer. More information. Now, so I put all this information in questions, right? Well, it's going to want some sort of response to a question. So what I did was made these multiple choice questions, provided information, but if it was one where I wasn't actually asking for information, I just said, are you ready to move on, right? So yes, I'm ready to move on to the next bit of information. Okay, here's the next bit of information. I provided some images about cancer statistics. And then are they ready to move on? Yes. So there's a case study in here, but there's lots of information that comes in between some of the information about the actual case. And I just want to skip down a few more because I want to show you. So you can see that there's lots of information, there's lots of text, there's links. Now there's some more about the case, and now I'm actually asking them to think about cancer, how it relates to the immune system and to DNA damage and things like that. And then now I've even embedded some YouTube videos into here, into this case study, so they can learn more about the cell cycle, DNA damage, DNA repair, those sorts of things. They watch some videos, there's an image about cell cycle, and then they're going to answer, this is sort of like, are you understand content here now? Let's do a content check question. about P53 and how it regulates the cell cycle, that sort of thing. And then they're gonna move all the way through this case study. And then at the end, they submit it. And because this one, I set up a quiz, I actually wanted to give them points for this. So they will get a grade for these questions that were actually content check graded questions.
And so Lorinda asks the question that I'm sure we're all thinking, which is, how much time did it take you to create this? And did you make up even a fraction of that with how little time it takes to grade it?
So great question. So there are a couple answers to that. So this actually, before Canvas, this same thing existed as a Google form. And Blackboard, awful, terrible, hated using it, tried to avoid it at all costs. So I would put a link to a Google form into Blackboard, and they would take this quiz as a Google form where I could embed videos, images, all these same things. And then I would just have to, once their grades were done, I have to then type those into Blackboard. But now I had to transfer it all over to Canvas. So making the original in Google Forms took a lot of time, yes. Now putting this into a quiz took a lot less time. It still took some time to upload the images. You know, I had to find where all the images were after all this time, then insert them into here, copy and paste all the text. But it wasn't terrible because it was I already had all the information here. Any other questions about a quiz like this?
So Eric, when you have the self quizzes like these, is it easy to then take some of these questions or questions like this to make the immediate test, the real test, for example?
So I'll say that it depends. I mean, if you wanted to use this exact question, that's super easy because with any questions, let me go back to my, I don't have it. You can make any question that you have in Canvas part of a test bank, and then you could just from the test bank add it to a new quiz. But for example, like if I wanted to ask a question just like this one, but I didn't want to have all of these images and videos in there, then I would just have to make a new question and I could copy and paste or just retype in this particular text for this question. Or I could add this to the bank, make a copy, delete all the images, and then import that copy from the test bank into a new one, depending on how much text is here that I do or don't want to have to copy and paste.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is and I think you know this, but this is not the same thing as the Qualtrics thing that's not graded. This one
Exactly.
is actually in the Canvas quiz and it's easy to transfer back and forth, as opposed to the Qualtrics, which would be another step, right? Because
yeah. So let me get out of student view, and so here, this cancer case study is a quiz in Canvas. So if I go to grades, oh, I'm still in student view, sorry. Leave student view. So if e-learning services is listening, pretend you didn't hear this in case you care, but somebody at IT at some point set me up my own little sandbox in Canvas. So I have my own little testing ground here. So this isn't a real class for me, but I was like, I want to try some tools, but I can't do that in the class where all the students are and all that, you know, it was like, you can preview stuff, but I wanted my own thing. So I can play with this, assign it to myself, and then, because I have a student LC Mail account as well, so that I can create things in this class that has my Google test student in here, and then I can view them and all that stuff too. So if you like to use this stuff a lot, maybe, you know, talk to Angela's nice, maybe she'll help you set something up so that you do these kinds of things as well. If they'll create you a separate LC Mail account, or only add, yeah, because I don't know how else to add myself as a student. I want to be able to see things as a student, not a preview, but I want to actually go in and take the test or see what it looks like both, student and
Angela is too scandalized right now to react.
But so I'm able to do all of these things and keep them here in this grade book. So I tested out an Edpuzzle thing to see how well it worked. I could do it as a student and then see how it worked from both student and instructor end. And then I use that in one of my classes. So anyway, but that cancer case study is in here somewhere, but it showed, oh, here it is. So I submitted it without actually completing it. So I have a 0 here, but it's an assignment or a quiz, whatever you want to call it, in Canvas. So last thing, so doing this in Canvas is great because it will auto grade the things that it can auto grade, or if you ask essay type questions, you can go in and manually grade those. You don't have to know any HTML coding. I mean, you don't have to know HTML coding to embed Qualtrics, but you have to be a little more savvy with how to do that. And Canvas does allow you to put basically anything into those questions, videos, other types of media, images. So even though it's a question, it's just like a page really with what you can add into there. Now it doesn't run as smoothly as the page because it's broken up by all these separate questions. So it's takes a little more, the creation is a little bit different because I'm having to create all these new questions every time I want there to be a break, right? And then, when a student's answering at the end of a question, you have to have something at the end of a question before they move on to the next thing. But, with questions in Canvas, it doesn't have cool branching options. So even like using a Google form, it had branching options where I could say, depending on what this student answers, move on to the next question or not. And I don't think that you can do that in Canvas quizzes. At least I haven't come across that yet. So there's a few pros and cons to using either of these tools for what are pretty similar outcomes.
Excellent. And just as a time notice, we've got about 2 more minutes, and I want to be cognizant of our interpreters' time. So if there's maybe a question or something like that, I know you had one more thing that we could either post as a quick video or, if maybe there's a couple of minutes that you wanted to show that, or just answer questions. I think
Yeah, so if you want to, you can think of some questions, and while you're doing that, I'll just say one thing. So I was watching last week's session, which I couldn't attend in person, but some people were using Jamboard. Why can't I go to the next window? Which I need to explore some more. But one of the things that I've used instead of Jamboard is Google Drawings. So this was an assignment that I gave my students this first week in intro bio. We're talking about basic chemistry stuff. And I wanted them to think about, sort of what they already know. So I created like 8 versions of this document and shared it with 5 different students for each of those documents. And then they clicked the link in Canvas to their shared document. And then they all together at the same time could edit and create a concept map of all of these things. So this is an example then of the finished product where one of the groups, right, rearranged all of the terms and created linker phrases, and they all were working on the same document at the same time. And they actually could turn this in as a group assignment in Canvas because I set it as such. It took a lot of effort to get it set up, or a fair amount of effort because I'm used to doing these things. But I thought, well, that worked out pretty well, and it was pretty cool to do that. So, and also, I'm not going to show you because this is an actual document from students, but you can actually go in, I don't have enough, and view. I would be able to go in to revision history in Google Docs, and I'd actually be able to see who did what on that document. This is just me on here, so you can't see that. But if you had 5 students working on the same document, you'd be able to see who did what when. So if there was an argument from a group that says, I did all the work, or this person did anything, you can actually track that in Google Docs as long as it exists as a Google Doc and not after it's gone into Canvas. So anyway, that's just was one other thing that I thought there's another way you can use Google assignments for your students in their classes.